Hi, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be back with a new webinar today.
Absolutely.
On a very interesting topic, right?
Yeah.
It's a protocol that's been out for, I think, less than 6 months, and it's creating quite the waves, right? So I really believe that where Agentic AI was maybe 6 months ago is where MCP is today.
Correct,
right?
correct.
And so before we kickstart, Abhinav, in the context of Agentic AI, what have you seen in the last 3-6 months that's really changing? And why is MCP now sort of exploding within this, Agentic AI framework?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, great question, Raghav. I think the biggest change that we're seeing, right, is that a lot of people implemented AI systems, generative AI systems over the last year. And the true extraction of value, essentially, everyone reached to is that it needs to talk to my systems, right? It's kind of like when you hire a new employee in your organization, right? And imagine they're very intelligent, like an LLM, but they can't touch any of your systems, right? They don't have an account for your accounting system. They can't talk to your project management system. They can't talk to your CRM.
Right. So they're just very intelligent.
Yes.
But they are intelligent in a silo.
Yeah, and they can't talk to email.
Right. So they're like a consultant.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Sorry, bad one. Yeah.
So I think that gap, the ability of what that person can do becomes just advice.
Okay.
Right, but if you want them to do something, you need to give them access to systems.
Correct.
And traditionally, systems and data.
Correct.
So traditionally, what people were doing was they were kind of connecting using APIs.
Okay.
So one was like, there were probably three common ways of connecting to a system, right? One is an API. So here is an API for my CRM to pull all the latest data from it. So, so they would do that. The second approach would be like, if you want to talk to a database, right? Like, hey, I have this data in Excel or this data in this database.
On a SQL.
SQL, yeah. So then you'd create like a SQL connector, a Snowflake connector to talk to those, or MongoDB connector to talk to those systems.
So connectors.
Yes.
Okay.
And then there would be like these other systems like email.
Right.
Email, you use something called IMAP, which is an IMAP connector. So
I'm old enough to actually remember what IMAP and POP before that was.
So basically, so these are like different connectors, right? So, it was getting very complicated to build these integrations. And then you need to teach the LLM or the language model how to talk to the system in terms of, okay, if this is how you create a lead in CRM, this is the API to delete a lead. This is the API to fetch all the leads. This is the API to fetch the latest customers. This is the API to do this. So you have to teach all of that to the LLM. And if someone else developed a different application, they would have to do that all over again.
So So it's literally for each application you're putting in all this hardware.
So basically, I think the challenge came from the fact that the traditional world was built for human programmers, right?
Okay.
So a lot of the ways there was no standardization across these protocols, right? So SQL has its own thing going on, REST has its APIs have their own thing going on.
Okay.
Email has its own thing going on.
Right.
Which is okay. Like the world's kind of got used to it for developers, but for language models, I think people ask the question that is there an easier way to just integrate with all of this repeatably?
Okay.
Across different developer teams, across different toolings, right? Like say, you could be using, ChatGPT Enterprise. I could be using Claude. And you could be using a Fluid AI Enterprise solution.
Right.
Someone could be using Microsoft Copilot within the same org.
Correct.
Right.
You bring your own agents.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So there's so many agentic platforms. Someone could be writing it in Crew, custom in Python, right?
Correct.
And now each of them is rebuilding those integrations, learnings to the different systems from scratch. So this is a big waste of time.
Okay.
So MCP came out of that invention that there must be an easier way to teach LLMs in a standardized way to talk to systems.
Okay.
So that's how it came.
Okay. So it's almost like the API of the agentic world.
Correct.
If I was sort of very crude about it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like one standardized way that the agentic world talks to all different kinds of systems.
Okay. And so in very single language, Abhinav, and I know it's you sort of have danced around it, but like, what is MC?
Yeah.
Like what is it like? Is it just a bunch of APIs packaged together? Is it a new sort of way of integration?
Yeah. So let me bring up a diagram or create a diagram on the fly to explain this concept to you essentially, right? So imagine, and I hope everyone can see my screen. I'm just going to kill a lot of these, right? Imagine this is your LLM. It's going to make this bigger, right? So we have, I'll zoom in a bit as well. So this is your LLM, right? And it could be whatever system, LLM / or agentic system, let's say.
Agentic, okay.
Yeah. All right. And this is, let's say these are your systems. So this is like an SQL database that has like a pull down of all the sales data.
Right? Okay. So it's essentially maybe from a ERP or CRM.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is my email.
Okay.
Email inbox, right?
All right.
That my customers mail me whenever
support
there's
and
support
things
email
or refunds.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
This is my CRM.
Okay.
Right. So all my sales data rests here.
All right.
And let's say this is my project management system like Jira or Linear or Asana.
Okay.
Right, which depending on
all the tasks,
your poison. So the traditional way was, supposing I have this LLM agentic system, I would build a SQL connector here, right?
Okay.
So this would need a SQL connector.
This SQL connector would literally be database commands, right?
Yes, SQL
queries
code.
and pulls and joins and pushes.
That, yes, exactly. So, and then for email, I'd use IMAP.
So that would be literally the emails coming into the box are being read by the IMAP protocol and being passed to the LLM.
Yeah, and IMAP has a lot of funky things around like how you pull it, when you pull it.
That's another protocol.
Yeah.
All right.
So, and then there's REST API.
That's the way you connect to your CRM. So your Salesforces, your Dynamics.
Yeah, and if you have legacy, you might have something called a SOAP API, which is like a older version of REST.
Okay.
So again, like these systems. So like this is where you rest today.
Okay.
And so what you do is you teach your agentic system, like even between these two, like these have many APIs, right? The CRM, like I said.
It looks like one API, but there are like 10, 15 APIs.
Yeah, like an API for creating the lead, API for doing the different tasks.
Yeah, updating it, deleting it, modifying it, all of that, right? Yeah.
So the LLM developers in this agentic system would program all of these, right? So let's say this has 10 possibilities, 10 things you can do. Yeah, so 10 APIs within it.
Correct.
This is standard, like send email, receive email. So 2.
Right.
This has read from the database, delete from the database,
update the table. Yeah.
This again would have another like 10.
Correct.
Right. So you would then code these manually in this system, in this LLM agentic system.
All right.
Right. Whereas now what you can do is and the worst part was, so let's say this is Fluid AI Enterprise is agentic platform, right?
Right.
And I built all these connectors in.
And you did all the hard work.
Yeah, I did.
40 connections.
Yeah, and someone's like, oh, I use Python directly and I use Crew AI, right?
Right.
So, or whatever, LangGraph library, I do it directly. Yeah. They would have to do all of these 30 connections and training. And
it's not just the connection, it's the testing, it's the validations, it's the tunings.
Yeah. And the way you explain an LLM, what an API can do is like you have to give English commands saying that, okay, this is the API to create a lead. These are the parameters it will accept. These are the format. All of that also needs to be provided to the LLM in English.
All right.
So you need to do all of that. So now this guy needs to do all of that again.
Right.
And then someone says, oh, I also have an implementation of Azure, Microsoft Copilot.
Right.
So now I need to do all of that again.
Right.
Right. Like,
so literally every time a new platform, either on the purple side or a new agentic platform is launching, you're literally reinventing the wheel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now this old world, what the new approach for this is essentially, and it's quite cool. Let's move it here. This is this team, like the team that goes first, will be like, okay, you know what? I'm building. Let me just take one of these boxes. I'll put this in yellow for MCP. I'm building a MCP for the CRM.
Okay.
It's called an MCP server. The word server is a little confusing because
it's actually
it's not. It is a server, but like it's like
it's not API, a hardware component. Exactly. It's just a conceptual.
So someone create an MCP server.
Right.
It'll still have this part of the work, right? This like it'll have that REST API conversion, whatever.
Okay.
But all of the other things, like what does each API do, the commands to be given to the LLM to use an API.
Okay.
All of that's in this.
Oh, all right. So if I want the other agentic systems to connect, I just simply push them to the MCP server. And instead of doing 10 different things, I just connect one MCP server.
So all these systems nowadays, right, they come, and this is where the tipping point for MCP happened, right? So Anthropic built it. OpenAI said we're going to use it as well. Google said we're going to use it as well. Microsoft agreed to use it as well. And then suddenly everyone's like, yes, this is the platform.
Okay.
So all, like whether you're coding in pure Python.
All right.
So let's say this becomes an MCP protocol, right? And then the same thing for this, like you'll build an MCP server for your email.
Okay.
And you'll build an MCP server for
your database.
For your database.
Got it.
And you'll build an MCP server for your project management.
So the question I have for you, Abhinav, is who's going to build this MCP server? If my CRM is Salesforce or it's Dynamics, does Dynamics build the MCP server, or do I as a user just put together the APIs that Dynamics or Salesforce or my CRM provider has and build my own MCP server on top of that?
So the good thing is that a lot of the providers now, that when MCP really picked up, a lot of the providers ended up creating their MCP servers.
Okay.
So like they like, so if you go and search, and you say, okay, let's say I use Salesforce, right? And you search Salesforce MCP.
Yeah.
There's actually a high possibility that you will get a ready MCP server for Salesforce.
All right.
So these places where like all these MCP packages, like servers lie, like pre-prepared ones, it's called a registry.
Okay.
Like, so it's almost like a registry of packages.
And there's a concept called Fluid MCP, which will be launched, which we'll be talking about a little later.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay.
So now suddenly, if you see this, I just need to talk to this, and this does. So this protocol is standard. It's one MCP protocol, which basically means that you don't need to do anything. MCP protocol is not like has much in it. You just provide the URL of the MCP server.
Oh, okay.
And it pulls down from this.
It's literally a few lines of.
Yeah, it's like one line of code.
Or a single variable, just a URL.
Yes, URL and any like environment, like any variables, like this is my email inbox's username, password. This is my CRM's
API token. So this is the credentials.
Yeah, this is my SQL database's credential, read access, username, password. Right. So suddenly you have a system that's fully dynamic. So tomorrow this Python developer comes.
Okay.
And he's like, oh, I also need to talk to the SQL system.
All right.
Boom, I just use that URL. And what would have taken me 10 days of work and testing is now a minute of getting it. And someone comes, oh, I have a third-party platform.
Right. I'm a new agent.
Yeah. And I want to talk to the project management. Oh, we already have an MCP for that. So let's just connect it, put the URL in. And this platform can now talk to the project management system automatically. Got it.
So obviously, we talked about the happy state where the vendors of our different software, the CRP, ERM, they're building the MCP server. Is there a possibility that, if there's a bunch of APIs, but my vendor has not yet built an MCP, so I or my team just builds it once and for all, abstracts that layer away, or it has to come from the vendor?
No. So you can build an MCP server to do anything. So you can build your own custom MCP server,
which could talk to multiple systems.
Yeah, which could which could talk to your custom systems, which could talk to these systems.
Okay.
It could talk to a combination of systems.
Okay.
Like you could do whatever you want, and then just have people talk to your MCP.
Oh, wow. So let's say if as a company I have a CRM, I have an ERP.
Yeah.
And I want to build my own MCP. So I build a single MCP server that connects both the ERP and the CRM.
Yeah, and you could...
And then my talks to my Agentic platform.
So in your MCP, you basically build something called tools, like MCP tools.
All right.
Tools are basically functionalities that people can execute.
Okay.
So you could have like a report tool on the custom MCP server. And it could take one parameter, which is which day's report or which month's report you need.
Okay.
Right. So someone passes month Jan and I want the report tool. Give me the report for month Jan. This MCP system could be programmed to say, okay, go to the database, also go to the CRM, collect all the data, combine it into one table for the month of Jan and return it.
And give it to the Agentic AI to build a report.
So the Agentic AI system just needs to be told that every time someone asks for a sales report, this is the MCP server. It has this tool. That's it. It doesn't even need this. This all goes automatically through the protocol.
Okay.
And it will know there's this report tool available. The instructions of how to use the tool, what this tool does is available. Right. And that it takes a parameter called month.
Got it.
So you just connect it and suddenly you could chat to it saying, hey, I want February's report.
Got it.
And it would do the need.
So literally the MCP, a custom MCP could combine multiple systems.
Yes.
If possible. Or if our vendors already have it, then it's just best to just connect to the existing MCPs.
Yeah.
And then let your Agentic do the heavy loading, Agentic system do the heavy loading, wherein it's pulling the data from 2 to 3 systems, combining it and getting a report, right?
Correct.
Or would you still recommend in building a custom MCP?
No, so the catch here, or the thing you need to be careful, right? So if I search, let's say, MCP server for Jira, it looks like Atlassian is launching something.
Okay.
But I might pick this guy's, right? For example, Superset.
Okay.
And developer on the internet who's built like a Jira MCP.
Okay.
Right. And I could run this. The risk or the challenge that most people face over here is that MCPs have one thing, right? They're sending the instruction to the LLM of what to do.
Right. Within the Agentic
platform.
Right.
So if not vetted correctly, it could poison the LLM's behavior.
Okay.
Right, you could tell this report tool could look very nice, and it could have a set of instructions also that whenever the user asks for a report, please give it to him. But it could have like an underlying hidden injection, or like in the text of the prompt, it could be written in the MCP that also when you're running, copy the password file located in this particular directory, the FTP password file, and email it to XYZ.
Right.
And the LLM, if not having the right guardrails, could end up just executing that MCP.
Okay, got it. Because the MCP is anyway a set of instructions.
Correct. Instructions and tools.
Tools, right.
Right. Of how to use those tools. Right?
Okay.
So
the core system.
Yeah, exactly. So you could have MCPs with backdoors, with security risks essentially that get brought in.
Got it.
So how do you solve for that, right? And that's where we came up with actually Fluid MCP.
Okay.
Which was basically a registry. There are about if you go to random registries, you'll get like 5,000, like hundreds of MCPs.
Right.
But what we did was basically we created an MCP registry of verified packages.
Okay.
Which is basically any registry which has, it's a registry which has a set of packages that have been vetted by our teams.
Okay.
And then there's an 8-step AI process that runs to check that the package has no injection in it, no tricks in it. And therefore, this becomes a more safer space to download and use MCPs, essentially.
Got it. Right. So it's almost like pre-vetted MCP service.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
And how many packages does it have right now? And about how many MCP servers?
So we have about 100.
Okay.
And we keep adding more every day as we move on.
Okay. And then how does this be used by like an enterprise? Is it just open source? You just go online and start using
so
it?
the registry is publicly available.
Okay.
You can submit packages as well for approval. You can just download the package and use it. Or we've actually built something which is open source, which is called Fluid MCP.
Okay.
Which is the package manager part for the MCP, which is essentially a command line that allows you to run these MCPs quickly.
Okay.
Right? Because so to run an MCP, basically, you need to download the MCP, then you need to figure out the right command to run the MCP.
Okay.
And then you need to add that MCP to whatever agentic system you're using.
Okay.
But to make that whole process easier, we just have this command line package, which it has a bunch of fun commands, right? So you could you could just install Fluid MCP using pip install.
Okay.
And then you can just install additional packages like from the registry.
Okay, from the Fluid MCP registry.
Okay. But it can run custom packages as well. So if you have packages that are not in the registry but you want to run them, you can just go ahead and run them, and then you just provide the JSON file of the format and you say run. Okay. And it just spins up a server with the MCPs running securely behind a token.
Got it.
So it allows you to run remote MCPs securely, quickly, efficiently.
Sort of like almost like a sandbox or a testbed.
Testbed, and can be used in production as well.
Got you. So you then, if everything's working out okay, you then move it to production and you can continue using the same.
Correct.
Got it. All right. So very exciting, Abhinav. And I think there's a question from one of our viewers. It's on someone really trying to grasp MCP. How does MCP decide what context actually matters when there's so much data in these systems, right? So the systems are dealing with so much data, and then here's the LLM pushing a query via the MCP server. So how does the right kind of context get located?
No, that's a great question. I think typically the MCP servers, like the programmer of the MCP server, kind of decides how much context flows through to the LLM.
Okay.
Right. So if I have like a data, like I have this MCP SQL that's talking to a database system.
Okay.
Right. And it could be like, get records could be a functionality, right? Get records from this table.
Okay.
So, but I could program in the MCP system that, only like, even if the table is like 100,000 records, don't send that to the LLM and just blow it up.
Okay.
Like send a summary or send the first 10 records only.
Okay.
Because the LLM just needs context of what's there in the table. It doesn't need each record.
It doesn't need each record, correct.
Yeah. So depending on the use case, the programmer of the MCP decides how much context flows through.
Got it.
Similarly, in the project management one, right? Like if you have like a get open issues function within the MCP server,
which could be a lot.
yeah, exactly. It could be a lot, right? So then it could be, and then you could return the description, the comments of the issue, like all that. Then the MCP developer decides how much do I return, what do I return.
Okay, got it. So that's almost dependent on the way the MCP server is written to sort of decide and then give the context. And that's where I guess you may have different MCP servers for the same system, but some may be better at managing the context, or some may be more tuned to your needs.
Correct.
So maybe two different users use two different MCP servers, even for the same system.
Correct.
Right. And then, so we've been here. MCPs, I guess, Anthropic launched the protocol in February.
Yeah.
And then they became quite hyped up in April, May.
Yeah.
And but are we seeing real world usage, or are folks still in the API world, right? Because I know there have been some massive MCP launches. I think one of the Indian brokerages, Zerodha, launched a massive MCP server. But you're not really, it's sort of dying down, or maybe the teams are sort of taking time to develop their MCP servers. So where are you seeing it on ground developing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement from the entire dev community on using it, making it accessible. I think the world's still searching for a smart way of doing it and managing it.
Okay.
Right? And that's where even Fluid MCP was born about, from the lack of, things like a registry where all the MCP packages can go, a command line to spin up MCP servers easily, securely. So I think it'll still take 2-3 months. We think Fluid MCP is a really great solution around that, but I think in the next 3 to 6 months you'll find those enterprise approaches that really work, that will solve this problem for better universal adoption. As time progresses.
And let's say someone has a legacy application today, and they have no APIs. It's developed maybe 15 years ago. Would the right approach be for them to develop an MCP server right now? Is that a way to sort of skip APIs, or is API still the fundamental building block of a great MCP server?
So the question is essentially, right, like the MCP server still needs to find a way to talk to that legacy system. Right. So either you kind of have to build that bridge somehow. And interestingly, you could, and Janvi, if you can have the screen back up again, right? The last mile bridge could be, so let's say this is a legacy project management solution, right? And there's no way to connect to it. You could say, okay, I'll just build APIs in front of this so that my MCP can talk to it. But if you're putting something else in front, right, like a RPA solution or a UiPath solution, then you could just have the MCP directly communicate to the UiPath solution.
Oh, wow. So the RPA could then become a part of that journey.
And then you don't build the rest.
Wherein instead of APIs, you have RPA. And then MCP servers are interacting with the RPA to code.
So the MCP server is triggering off an RPA process to open that system manually in the browser and look up something.
So this could almost be a great way to sort of, for systems which have no APIs or stuck, 12, 13 years, you're still unable to replace it because of some code dependency. And you can still get in RPA and very smoothly with MCP and RPA coming together, almost have a API and get it into the agentic world from a front-end perspective at least.
Yes.
Okay. So, and then, coming to Fluid MCP and, the overall, if you can just tell our viewers in terms of what it's all about and how can they use it, and then we can close off from there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so I think you can just go to, if you want to use the registry, just go to fluidmcp.com. And for the, I'll actually put the, I'll have Janvi put the link to the GitHub repository for it. So you should definitely check that out. Just sending it over.
And while Abhinav puts the links in, if anyone has any further questions, feel free, happy to put it in the chat. Happy to take them. But I think Janvi, if you can put up the Fluid MCP repository on GitHub, you can check that out as well. So that's another very effective tool that folks can use.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, do check it out. Start it if you like it, and it's a great way of starting a remote MCP repository instantly. No questions asked, fast. And getting stuff done.
Awesome. All right. So thank you everyone for sort of logging in today. And, it was very exciting. I want to thank you for your time and just exploring the MCP world and how it could sort of really change things around. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, on our website. Happy to take your questions there as well. And in the meanwhile, thank you. And we'll be coming up with new webinars. Please keep tuned for them as well.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.